Good morning, everyone.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Welcome to St. Bernardine's Thursday morning Bible study. We've been doing the Catechism. Last week, we were reviewing the fourth commandment to honor thy mother and thy father, and it was a lot of issues about family and about um, authority, whether institutional or governmental authority. And then I needed to leave, and I understand you had a question after that.
Yeah, our question is 2202. Garnetta had a question on that, and everybody chimed in. So if you put that up, we can figure out which 2202 is what the one is.
All righty. Oops. 2202. A man and a woman united in marriage, together with their children, form a family. This institution is prior to any recognition by public authority, which has an obligation to recognize it. It should be considered the normal reference point by which the different forms of family relationship are to be evaluated. That that paragraph?
That's the
Yes.
yeah.
And what was the question?
And I think it was both 2202 and 2203 because we were talking about what my understanding was that the church, and I think Gwen brought this to our attention as well, that the church does not recognize in vitro fertilization.
It does not encourage or approve of in vitro fertilization. Is that what you mean by it doesn't recognize it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Uh, no, it is not. Uh, it does not promote or encourage in vitro fertilization. It is kind of suspicious of all biological efforts to um, change or I don't interfere isn't quite the word, but manipulate the procreation process. Let's put it that way. And that applies to things like artificial birth control and things like in vitro fertilization or artificial insemination. Any
Mm-hmm.
artificial method of affecting the procreative process. So that would all fall in under those things.
So then that made me think about, you know, what Sarah Huckabee Sanders said about um, just the
Olive.
ba- basically what I understood her to say was that stepchildren, children of in vitro fertilization, are not as equal in dignity as other children who are fundamentally born through man and woman. And the children that are already here, how could someone think that way? What do we do? What about the children who are here via in vitro fertilization? Which, from me listening to the news and all, I'm surprised that how many women have gone through this process because they wanted to have children. So do we treat them with this? I mean, how can you not treat the children that are already here with the same dignity, even if that's a process that we don't accept?
I have a question. I'm not familiar with what Sarah Huckabee said. Could somebody tell me? Or maybe you could do that, Loretta?
Garnetta.
Oh,
Garnetta. I'm sorry. Sister.
um, what did she say exactly? She was comparing herself um, and to other women, and she said that she has children, she's married, and she has children, and when those children come home to her, she feels humble. But she was talking in a traditional marriage sense. So women who don't have children, or women who are outside of that traditional husband and wife marriage, are not the children, really is not a family to be respected like her own. Basically, that's what she was saying.
I think that's an inference.
Okay, I mean, I can't comment on what Sarah Huckabee may have said or believes, um, but the Catholic Church, all human beings have the dignity of being children of God, no matter how they were conceived. So a child who is conceived through artificial means, like either artificial insemination or in vitro fertilization, there's several different ways in which scientifically we can create embryos that can then ultimately be grow into human children. um, any child is a child of God and has the equal dignity of all other children. So in Catholic understanding, the child, him or herself, their status is not different because of the way they were conceived and born into the world. So I don't know what Sarah Huckabee said, but I can assure you that the Catholic Church teaches that any child is a child of God with the dignity of being a child of God.
Well, she said she, what was this? Can you hear me?
Hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. She said Sarah Huckabee said my kids keep me humble. And she said, unfortunately, Kamala Harris doesn't have anything keeping her humble.
Right.
So it was like a dig at her.
Yeah, I mean that's all political statements. I wouldn't,
Yeah.
I wouldn't put any credence to that. I mean, so be absolutely clear that even though the church does not approve of artificial means of procreation, certainly the children who are the product of that are children of God with the dignity of children of God.
Yeah.
Okay, so then does I'm a little confused because so then when a child is in a test tube, and let's say someone decides to get rid of that, um there's an embryo inside of a test tube. Does the church consider that murder if you decide to get rid of the embryo?
I don't know. I mean, so first of all, you have to realize murder is a legal term. It's not a moral term. Um, Murder is defined by the state in a variety of ways, but first degree murder is the deliberate and intentional taking of a human life without justification, basically. But so one state actually there was, I think, a ruling that yes, the disposal of embryos fit under the definition of that.
It's Alabama.
Um, yeah, but the church would say yes, that the disposal of an embryo would be the taking of human life because it considers life begins at conception. So an embryo would be a living human being, even though not fully developed. So that the disposal of an embryo, the deliberate disposal of an embryo by another
Mhm.
human person, would be the killing of a human being, as opposed to the natural expulsion, say, of an embryo, through a miscarriage. A miscarriage is the death of a child, but it's not the killing of a child.
Yeah. That might
It's
be part
something.
of next session.
Yeah, yeah,
God's
it's really
the next commandment.
perplexing to me, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, the church takes a very strict position on these issues, and mostly because the concern that, in its theology, once you start playing with these things, uh,
Mm-hmm.
then, it becomes harder to distinguish what is right or wrong or moral or immoral. And so that basically the church takes the tougher stand to say, we're not going to approve any of it. Now, somebody raises that a sin. Sin raises other issues. So,
Mm-hmm.
so remember one time we made the distinction between an evil and a sin. So an evil is something that is in and of itself wrong or evil, bad. Um, so the church would say the disposal of an embryo is an evil. Whether it's a sin, it depends on the intention of the person who disposed of the of the embryo, whether they did they fully reflected and chose to dispose of the embryo, whether they had full and free will to do it. So sin then introduces those other concepts. Um, so just because something is an evil doesn't make it a sin. It becomes a candidate for sinful behavior, but it is not in itself a sinful matter.
Okay.
So the miscarriage of a child, for example, is an evil. It's a bad thing. That's not something we want, but there's no sin attached to it. Yeah, unless a person deliberately induced the miscarriage. Does that make sense, at least how the church is making those distinctions?
Um,
Well, it gets a little confusing to remember all the things that it is. So make it simple. Or it's like having an abortion makes it evil, but not necessarily a sin, right?
And
Is
an abortion would always be an evil, and
it
then its sinfulness would depend on those other elements.
the intent? The
So, I mean, a classic example would be a teenage girl whose parent forces her to have an abortion. That's an evil. It's a bad thing.
sin.
The girl herself probably committed no sin with respect to it because she did not have free will, and the sin would not fall on the parent who who forced the abortion, and the medical professional who performed the abortion.
Isn't that funny? I mean, it's not funny, but it's just what I'm saying. Because what you see in the media, what people would say the girl was the sinful one because she got pregnant.
Well,
That's
there may have been sin, right, in the conception of the child, but if she's being forced by someone that has authority over her, to have an abortion,
right,
and for her, the abortion isn't a sin. So,
right.
the means by which she became pregnant might be a sin, but that's a different act from the abortion.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, because the means by which she became pregnant, she could have been raped against her will too.
Sure.
Well, in any case, it wouldn't be a sin for her.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that would be exactly the case. If she were raped and she became pregnant, and then someone of authority forced her to have an abortion, she wouldn't have committed sin in any of that. She would have been the victim in all of those
Yeah,
actions.
but okay, but
That's confusing. It's
yeah, it is confusion, and then see, this is confusion because people making laws about all of this, and to all of this, and so I don't know whether the people, the lawmakers, understand it, or I know the public don't always understand it because the what how you explain it to us is a lot. And for me to remember it, I'm not going to remember it to tell somebody else. I probably have to call you up and say, "What did you say about that again?" You know.
What is hard about it? I think maybe you're making it harder than it is.
Mhm.
What is hard about the teaching? I mean, it may be hard to follow, but what is hard to understand about it?
I mean, okay, I can remember. Okay, in the beginning, the young girl committed a sin in conception, right? So,
Okay, could be.
huh?
So she deliberately has sex with a person, a man with whom she is not married.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
and she knows it's wrong. She thought about it completely, and she had full consent of the will, and she did that. That would make it a sin. Remember, you got those three things for all sins to be a truly a sin. It has to be a grave matter, an evil, and it has to be fully reflected upon, and then it has to have full consent of the will. If any of those three things are missing, it's not going to be a sin.
Okay, I'm just gonna leave it alone.
Why is that hard? I mean, it's pretty I mean, I think it's pretty simple. First, whatever, if you're going to talk about a sin, whatever is being done has to be wrong, right? It has to be evil. Um, so, um,
Ah,
that any sin involves that, right? I mean, if I give you a cup of cold water, that's not a sin, right? That's a good thing. If I, refuse to give you a cup of cold water and I'm, in a position to do so, that's an evil, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing is whatever we're talking about has to be an evil. It has to be, wrong, whatever we're talking about. Second, in any sin, there must be full deliberation, right? I have to think about it. I have to understand what I'm doing, and I have to know that it's wrong, and I have to say I'm going to do it anyway, even though I know all of those things.
that's how it happens.
Okay, so that's the mind, right? So the mind has to completely understand what you're doing and know that it's wrong and choose to do so anyway.
No, that's not how it happens. You don't think
Oh,
about.
I'm just talking about the elements of a sin.
sin.
I know what you're
So,
saying. I'm just saying that's not how it happens.
What you trying to change the elements of a city?
No, yeah, I mean, we're not talking about any particular sin. We're talking about any sin.
I
Okay?
understand.
In order for an act to be sinful, three things are necessary. The action has to be evil or
okay.
wrong. Okay? If it's neither evil nor wrong, you can't be a sin. You can't commit a sin by doing something good.
Right.
Second, in order for it to be a sin, you have to know what you're doing. You have to have thought about what you're doing. You have to know that it's wrong what you're doing, and you have to choose to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That's the mind, okay? So in order for you to commit a sin, you have to have thought about it. You have to know what you're doing. It's not that hard, right? And third, in order for it to be a sin, you have to have full consent of the will. In other words, you had full ability to choose yes or no, and you made the choose you're going to do the wrong thing. right? Whereas if you're being compelled, if somebody's putting a gun to your head and say, go punch this person in the nose or I'll kill you, that's not a sin. It's an evil because it's wrong to punch them in the nose, but it can't be a sin because you don't have free will in that situation. You're under duress. Okay? So those are the three elements. So if you're talking about a girl getting pregnant, well, is it wrong to become pregnant? I'll give you the answer.
No,
No.
No, it's
No.
not
it's
wrong
not
to
wrong
become
to become pregnant.
Becoming pregnant is not an evil. Okay? Was it wrong for her to have sex?
Well,
Well,
not
It
according to
depends.
her.
It depends on the
And the
situation.
it
situation.
depends on the circumstances. So if she's
Right.
married and she's having sex with her husband, assuming it's consensual and all that, then no, there's nothing wrong with that. If she's having sex with someone who is not her husband, right? The church would say that is wrong. It's an evil, right? That's not, people who are not married should not be having sex. That's the church's teaching, whether you like it or not. Okay. Now, is it a sin for her to have sex outside of marriage? Well, did she think about it? Did she have time to consider what she was engaging in? Did she know it was wrong and choose to do it anyway? All of those elements will come in to deciding whether she committed a sin in having sex outside of marriage. And then, of course, the other element has to be, did she have full consent of the will? Was she acting in a moment of passion and just gave over to her passions and not and had lost control of her will? Was she being, pressured to have sex and she did it not because she was raped, but because she was trying to give in, to other things? If she's got to have all of these elements to make it a sin. It has to be wrong. She has to have thought about it. She had to, and she has to fully consent with her will. Okay, all of those things. If she's done all those things, then yes, she's committed a sin. Is the pregnancy a sin? No, it was her having sex outside of marriage that was the sin.
And I say this, I think that what I hear Dee saying, and I could be wrong, is that why doesn't everybody think like that? She's talking about the lawmakers. Everybody doesn't apply these moral codes to life's events, and so they don't think it's a wrong, but we apply as Christians. Christians apply a moral code to these actions.
Well,
but many other people don't.
Either until Father Rich just told me, so I'm absolved of a lot of my sins.
Yes, I mean,
I thought this was an excellent explanation.
Yes, I do too.
Yeah, quite frankly, I mean, people attribute sinful behavior to basically anything that has a bad result, and that's not the case. So you can do something wrong without it being a sin. Are you getting that distinction?
Yes,
Yes.
I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, for all three elements, then you got to have the knowledge of it to know whether or not it's a sin. I mean, you got to know whether, you got to have the knowledge of whether what you're doing is wrong. And then you have to think about it. You got to deliberate on it to decide whether in fact it's wrong. And then you got to take the action on it, because something can exist as a sin, but you don't necessarily in your mind analyze it as such.
Now, something can be evil,
right?
In order for it to be a sin, you must have the knowledge and the free will.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
It sounds like it has, like the law, it has to be premeditated. This is what I'm going to
All
do.
right. Now, yeah,
Yeah.
don't confuse morality
No.
with legality, okay? So the law, the civil law, is a different thing. It hopefully is based on morality, but it isn't necessarily trying to reflect all of the principles of like Catholic morality. And
Right.
for example, I think that's the biggest trouble on the issue of abortion
Mhm.
because we immediately convert it into a political issue. And then that's where the fight is, occurs as to whether the government can interfere and boom, 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 boom. The moral piece has nothing to do with the government. The moral piece has to do with what you're doing wrong. Are you fully deliberating about it? And do you have full consent of the will? Okay.
And that's what takes me back to 2202 again. I keep going back to that because of that sentence in there about the you know what we think is moral, but then you have this institution, the institution of what we think is morality is prior to any recognition by public authority.
Yep.
And that public authority is what I'm really struggling with, because then it says you have an obligation to recognize it.
No, the public authority has the obligation to recognize that the institution of marriage comes before any public authority.
Could
Mm,
you say that?
mm,
Can you repeat
Say
that
that.
again,
So
mm.
Father
what
Rich?
that sentence says is
Uh-huh.
the idea of marriage
Uh-huh.
and family being a man and a woman united in marriage together with children, right? That notion precedes any public authority. In other words, the family unit exists in the eyes of God first, and then any public authority must recognize that.
Okay.
Okay? And it has to recognize, in other words, that the public authority does not create the marriage and family relationship. It already exists before the public authority. And then all the public authority does is recognize it.
So,
I really misunderstood that.
which is now being fragmented, right?
And
Yes.
so, right, this isn't about abortion. This is about same-sex marriage.
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So I just got an aha moment. This is the sentence that people are arguing about. This is
Yes.
the sentence that says, when other people says, well, everybody's family don't look like this. This is a sentence that says, well, God recognizes only a man and a woman united in marriage together with their children. All other stuff is what is it? Below this, irrelevant. All the other stuff is irrelevant. This is the unit.
And the key phrase that was said was "in the eyes of God."
Yes, this is so. The same-sex marriage, the I don't know. All the other stuff is not considered in this sentence. So
Only to appease
I have a
man.
question. I have a question. With this definition of what a family is, so a man and woman who are united in marriage and have not been able to conceive would not be considered a family
good question, Gwen.
because of this definition.
I mean, I think what they would say is right. I mean, a husband and wife without children is a marriage.
Okay.
Okay. I mean,
That
so
would be how that would be playing with words in order to get around
yeah,
that.
I mean, it's perfectly
Yes.
valid and all that kind of stuff. But the idea of family is more than a marriage.
Right.
It's not more valuable. In other words, a husband and wife who do not have children are thoroughly in compliance with God's law and, God's grace and all that kind of stuff. The fact that they don't have children doesn't make them less valuable. It's just,
Right.
I think what they're trying to say is family is more than just a husband and a wife. Family is as the norm. Now you remember that I have to go to that third sentence. This should be considered the normal reference point. Okay? In other words, that's the norm of what a family is. Then all other things gets judged based on that. So you start with a family is a marriage between a man and a woman together with their united in marriage together with their children. Okay? That's the norm. Now you go, okay, how about a man and a woman who are united in marriage but do not have any children? Okay, well, there's nothing immoral about that. It's just not what we would consider, in this context, a family.
2201 kind of speaks to that. 2201.
Right. Well, that's the whole idea of what marriage and family is.
Right. Marriage
Right, and
and
that's
family.
Right, but that's what Vice President Harris was on TV just a couple days ago talking about. She sees herself as having a family. She
Yep.
does not see herself as just being in a marriage. And that's why Sarah Huckabee Sanders said when her children come home to her, she feels humble, and pretty much implying that Vice President Harris does not. So, I mean, people, you know what I mean? People
That is
see themselves.
that is all politics. So read the statement. A man and a woman united in marriage together with their children. Doesn't say their biological children. With their children. The church absolutely recognizes adoption, right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
a man and a woman united in marriage together with an adopted child are completely a family. All right, and a man and a woman united in marriage where there might be a child by either the man or the woman, so it's a step parent and a stepchild, fully a family. So Kamala Harris, according to the church, is in a family. She's married to her husband, and
Right.
she is his kids are part of her family. She and those kids and her husband form a family. That is absolutely what this statement says.
Okay.
Oh, but what was the statement above that says? The love of the spouses and the begetting of the children create among members of the same family personal relationships and the
Primordial. All again, that's saying is that the foundation is about the relationship. So the primordial responsibility in Kamala Harris's situation is technically with Doug Emhoff and his first wife,
right?
The mother of those children. They are primordially responsible for those children.
Oh.
Kamala Harris comes in sort of from the side. What would you call that? Ancillary or whatever. And by marrying Doug Emhoff and becoming the stepmother of those children, she forms a family, but she is not primordially responsible for those children because she's not the biological parent, mother of those children.
It says that the church say, I know, we need to move on. The church.
Yes. Can I add one thing? Look at the Holy Family. We consider the Holy Spirit as the X chromosome. I'm sorry, the Y. The Y, and not Joseph. So that was a family that we hold in reverence. And the church also holds in reverence. So they became a family.
Absolutely.
But not necessarily by
biology.
The normal way.
Easy way of saying it is Jesus was not the biological son of Joseph. right?
Right.
Right.
You all agree on that.
Yes.
There is no doubt that Joseph and Mary, married to each other with a child, form a family. No doubt.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it surely did. So that should put an end to this question.
Okay. So just be careful when Sarah Huckabee is talking politics. She's not talking morality. And that's, to me, my biggest concern as a priest is that we blend politics and family so much that
Yep.
people don't understand there's a difference.
Exactly what I was trying to make earlier.
And
I
some
know
of it
you
is
make it
deliberate
simple.
to keep you
No, you make it
discombobulated.
yeah, with these three things, you make it simple. But those politicians out there are telling their view. This is one person, Huckabee, telling her point of view, and people believe in it because they don't understand all of it. You know what I'm saying? They take one little piece of it, and that's what the public understands. And that is the mission of the church, to make us understand it better so we won't fall into those traps. That's
Right.
As a moral perspective, the church finds that statement offensive,
right.
to imply that a stepmother is not part of a family is
Mm-hmm.
offensive.
I was
Yeah.
offended by it,
I
absolutely.
That a stepmother is not humble because she did not bear the children biologically is offensive to
Mm-hmm.
Catholic morality.
You know, one more thing. I'm going all the way back. I imagine Sarah was feeling this herself. She living in a community where she is barren, and this is the norm, and they are saying the same thing about her. She doesn't have a family. She can't bear children. And I can imagine how she's feeling.
Who are you talking about?
Sarah.
Sarah.
Sarah, as in Abraham and Sarah?
Abraham, Sarah,
Oh, okay.
Sarai.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was a disgrace back then, that if you didn't have any children, it was understood, it was thought that God didn't bless you. That
And
is
yes,
clearly not the church's teaching.
yes, and I can imagine being back there with her, feeling the way she's feeling that caused her and her good conscience to commit a sin. The sin, what was the sin? Giving her, her slave to her husband so that they could have a family.
But
Again,
that wasn't a sin, was it?
That
yeah,
wasn't her sin. No.
I don't know. Again, if you put it in the context of
She
the time,
initiated it.
that
Well, the
was
context of the
acceptable. That
time,
was
right?
acceptable practice.
Mhm.
But
Um,
she initiated it. So what makes it I don't open up another can of worms. Stop it, stop it, stop it. We
yeah,
don't
Right, because I have another question
we don't
too.
even have to go there. I don't open up another can.
okay.
I do too. Go ahead, Gwen. I want to say something too.
Well, and this is something that came up at Monday's Bible study. Um, if this was not if Sarah being barren would consider Abraham and Sarah not to be a family, quote unquote, um, would that help to enable or help Abraham to what I call prostitute his wife without having to pay a price for it? And this what I'm talking about is when he told her to pretend she was his sister, and the Egyptian king took her as his wife. That I call prostituting her because he asked her to do that so that he would be treated with kindness and would not be killed because she was so beautiful. He expected that they would kill him and take her. So he did this. But he remained in God's favor.
Yeah,
And I
I
mean, it comes up twice. It might be the same story repeated twice, but it comes up as if he had done it two times.
he did do
So,
it. He did it twice. Yes, there is.
okay.
in the story. So you have to understand, you cannot judge what people were doing in those days according to the standards we have today. And 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 morality definitely has to do with even the context of the day. So, remember, polygamy was perfectly acceptable in the early days of God's people and Judaism and all of that stuff.
Right.
It takes time for the people to discern what God's teaching is, and, even marriage, Jesus is still teaching about what marriage is.
Yeah.
And, so sin has to do with what you know at the time and what is accepted and taught as right and wrong and all of those kinds of things. So it's really hard to make a moral judgment about what Sarah and Abraham were doing, because again, it we can't fully understand what they knew, what they understood, what they had free will over. We're just not in that world. And you got to leave any moral judgment. Ultimately, is up to God. Only God knows what's in our hearts. So the church can say all it wants about what is right and wrong, but it cannot necessarily say you committed a sin, because only you and God know fully what's in your heart and what's in your mind. And those two elements are critical to determining whether a sin occurred. Something wrong might have occurred, but it might not be a sin.
I would say this:
Father
we better
Rich,
get to confession anyway,
if
if all three don't occur.
Father Rich, if and I'm going way back, women have children every day and is not married. People condone them for that. Mary
Some
was
are
pregnant.
condemned.
She was not married at first.
Who's that?
Mary, Blessed Mother.
Yeah, yeah, we just talked about that.
I mean, in the respect that if women have children and are not married, that the
Well,
same.
legally, Mary was married to Joseph when she conceived of Jesus.
Oh,
The marriage contract had been signed. So that's what betrothal means.
okay.
Today, we say betrothal as though it means engagement, but that's not what it meant then.
Yeah.
There were two steps to marriage: the signing of the marriage contract, and at that point, the man and the woman were husband and wife. But then there may have been a gap in the period of the signing of the contract and the time that the man took the woman into his home. And Mary and Joseph were in that gap. Okay. So Mary and Joseph were married, but she was not yet living with him.
Right.
So that made her an involuntary adulteress. And this is 21st century talking.
Well, again, no, that's ludicrous, because if God was doing it, we don't believe God can do something wrong.
No.
Oh boy. So
that
so
part.
so can I just toss, since y'all throwing hand grenades, can I toss this one in? So
I don't know
here
if
it
you
is.
want to.
Here it is. The first question is incest a sin?
By the person
Incest is
Incest
wrong.
is wrong.
Is
Okay.
wrong.
Yes.
Whether it's a sin determines on the condition. So if the father comes into the girl's bedroom and forces her to have sex with him, it's not a sin for her.
It's a sin for him. And
Okay. Okay. So here's the second part. I just said that as the setup. So
I
here's the
can't
second.
wait for it.
Here's the set. I mean, the second part is so how was the earth populated? God made Adam and Eve, and so then came Cain and Abel, and so on and so on and so on. But wouldn't they all be related?
Right.
That was a big
As we
question in
know.
Bible study.
Again, that depends on how you're going to interpret the story of Adam and Eve. If you're going to be literal, then there are concerns about that. But remember in the Bible, in even the Bible itself, when Cain is sent on his way, there he goes and finds a wife. Well, where'd she come from?
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, there's no indication that he's marrying the offspring of Adam and Eve. So even the Bible itself isn't clear about how all of that worked. And that's why as Catholics, we're not literalists. All right. We don't interpret that story literally as though all people and all creation had to come from a one man and one woman.
Mm.
The story of Adam and Eve is trying to teach us another point about who God is and what our relationship with God is, what our relationship with each other is, and what our relationship to the earth is. That's what the story of Adam and Eve is trying to do. But it's, in the Catholic point of view, it's not, it's not trying to teach us science about how men and women came about.
So I just tossed it in there, but we just have to be careful about being literalists.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at the Bible,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Is
I just put that out there. I mean,
Midrash?
I wasn't really,
Thanks
just for
a
the
lot,
sake of the
Michael.
conversation.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, Mike.
All right. Are we okay with this, or
Yes.
go on to thou
Can
shalt
y'all
not
exhale
kill?
now?
Yeah, Father Rich, I do have, because I've been quiet, I've been listening to everybody, but sometimes I believe that my thinking is kind of outside, even with the Bible, the canon, because I don't believe that God has told us everything. We didn't need to know everything. Just like you talk about Adam and Eve. It doesn't say that God didn't have other populations of people out there. Just like when it talks about how God chose the Hebrews. There were other types of people and ethnic groups and folks out there he could have chosen from. I just believe he chose the Jewish, the Hebrew tribe. So I think there are a lot of things, because we were talking about this yesterday, like the fundamentalists. You cannot read the Bible, in my opinion. So that's what I'm saying. Tell me if I'm wrong, word for word. It's inspired by God, but man wrote it down, and you have to know the context. Have to know the background, the time, and man is going to interject into whatever he's doing. So
Right.
maybe the word is inspired by God, but man is the one who's writing it down. So
Yeah, man left questions. Man left
yeah,
questions. I have to say that the question would be to me, you're right. I'm not gonna say you're wrong. God didn't tell us everything. He definitely didn't tell us everything, because we know that within our own lives that we have questions.
right.
But if you take a boat and put this family on a boat and tell us that the whole world is gone, and then all of a
Oh,
sudden,
D, I lost you.
if you take a boat
We're going
and
to
put a
Noah's
family
Ark
on a
now.
boat,
Now we're doing Noah's
I
Ark.
lost you, D.
Noah's Ark.
Maybe if she can finish, maybe we'll get the point.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying they left us with questions. No, we don't know everything. And the Bible, I believe the Bible is inspired by God. And to man wrote it down. But man left God, man, whoever left his questions. I'm just saying you can't put a family on a boat and then the whole world is flooded, and then you land them on a piece of land and then say, this is it.
This is it. Go. You're right. Right. So
That's
But
let's
this means, I
think
mean, but
about that.
remember, he had his sons and their wives.
yes. And Michael had a question. Michael was right. And says Michael was right. Nobody else is on the planet.
Yeah.
So who
That we've been told no one else was on the planet, that we've been told. We don't know.
but I'm just saying he left questions.
Yes,
That's
yes,
what I'm
yes,
saying.
yes.
There
All
are
right.
But what is there,
Come
the
on.
stories that
Let's,
God
We're
has
going to get
given
to
us
our
through his
topic
word
today.
we're
inspire
getting.
us
I,
to
I
look
need
to
to I
him.
need to stop because we're
Yeah.
getting way too, as we would call, casuistic, which is you're trying to come up with all these ideas that that are you can show something, and it gets ridiculous after a time. So let me clarify a few things. First of all, God has revealed everything to us in Jesus Christ. Okay, so the fact that God hasn't taught us everything is not true. God has revealed everything to us in Jesus Christ. We just haven't figured it out. Okay? So that's an important, very important concept, that all has been revealed to us in Jesus Christ.
I like that part.
But it's taking time for us to figure it out.
I like that part.
Okay? So now that's a very important Christian understanding, that all has been revealed in Jesus Christ. There is no more need for revelation. God does not need to reveal anything more to us. He has done it all in Jesus Christ. We're the ones that have to figure it out. What in fact did God reveal to us in Jesus Christ? Okay? That's our task. And we're still learning. 2,000 years later, we're still learning what God is revealing to us in Jesus Christ. Okay. With all these biblical stories, all I'll go back and say is we are not fundamentalists. We are not literalists. Many of these stories are stories, and they're intended to teach us something. They're not intended to record history. All right. So um, I think when you try to pull the story of Noah's Ark too apart, you're missing the fact that it's a story. It's not history. Okay? And basically what it's a story about is that even though humanity is so corrupt and so broken, God did not give up on it. God was ready to destroy everything, but then he had mercy on some human beings. And the story teaches us that God will never destroy us completely. All right? That he will always love the people and will never destroy us again, try to destroy us again. Does that make sense to you?
Amen,
That is
brother.
right.
Amen.
Amen, Father Rich.
Is the term
Exactly.
midrash,
Thank you,
Jewish
Father.
midrash, the correct term for describing the stories? For the stories? Am I using the
Midrash
wrong
is,
term?
no, midrash is more a process of how you take apart a story and you try to fill in all the gaps, and you argue here and there, and it would be like some of what we were doing. Well, if Noah, if Adam and Eve were the only two people, blah 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 blah. But it pulls it apart, not again to discover what was history. It pulls it
Right.
apart to understand
Understand
what's
what's being
truth.
said.
What is the truth that God is trying to teach us?
What was that term again?
Midrash.
Midrash.
Midrash. It's
Thank you.
Jewish.
Rich, I have a question. The three conditions of sin, I understand them. I just like to know, where does it originate from? Maybe I missed that.
Well, again, it's part of the church's tradition. It's what we've learned over time. It'll be in the catechism. I'd have to go look it up as to where it is in the catechism. But
I just like to see it where it originated.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look, and I'll see if I can find it where it is in the Catechism. But it's about morality. So whatever, it's probably in this section, of the Catechism. Um, but it's probably earlier than the Ten Commandments. That's what my guess would be.
Oh,
So are these three precepts that we recognize in the Catholic Church, are they generally recognized by other Christian churches?
That I don't know. I would imagine many, yes, because it's a basic
They're basic.
concept of, in order for there to be sin, it has to be a wrong act, it has to be thought through, and it has to be done willfully. It's not a hard concept. You make it harder when you try to overanalyze it.
right. It appears to be it's well simple to me and really the way you explained it. But in the past, when we were coming up in school, we just learned, was it a mortal sin or
Right,
venial
everything
sin?
was a mortal sin. You were going to
Yeah.
hell. That was and that's not what the church's teaching was. It's how they taught the church's teaching, which was a way of giving power to religious authorities. So that's how religious authorities had their power. They frightened you into thinking that if you didn't follow what they said, you would, be eternally damned. And one of the reasons religious authorities have lost their power in our society is that folks have rejected that idea that you can determine, what my ultimate fate is.
Right.
That
That's so
seems more on the rise now, that religious, however you just said it,
yeah,
with more people turning away from church and God.
people are starting to think more. But it's so funny because yeah, I had to laugh, Father, because you're right. The Baltimore Catechism, everybody was going to hell. Funny. Well, that was the Baltimore Catechism.
There you go. All right. Well, we got about 15 minutes left. Do we even talk about thou shalt not kill, or
Well, that's a whole nother thing. I just
At least let's start it anyway,
all right, let's
so we can
start
stay
it.
on track.
Because then we'll go on to the sixth commandment next week.
Yeah.
That'll be about the people having sex out of wedlock. Okay.
oh no.
Oh, Lord.
Those
Well,
of
in the
you who
back where we started.
those of you who can't uh, wait for that. All right, the fifth commandment. Michael, read it.
You shall not kill. You have heard that it was said to the men of old, you shall not kill, and whoever kills shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be liable to judgment.
Okay. So, what is the actual commandment?
You shall not kill.
Right. Okay. So, that's the commandment. But then Jesus takes that commandment and expands what it applies to. All right. So that's why this section is going to be really long, because it's kind of following through with what Jesus did. So killing is not, thou shalt not kill is not limited to the taking of human life. Okay. It goes beyond that. It includes even being angry and all of that stuff. Okay. So that's the first thing to set up. One of the things that I actually don't think this section did very well, but again, we need to be clear about terminology. Okay. So there's a difference between killing and murdering. Okay. There's a difference between homicide and killing and murdering. All right, so you have to be very clear about what it is. Killing is the taking of a life.
Right.
This context, a human life. But it doesn't even require a human action. So an animal can kill you, right?
Yeah, but it said you should not kill. It doesn't say an
No, no, no.
animal.
But we're looking at terminology first. Just what does it mean to kill? All right. To kill means to take a life.
Yes, a human life. Yes.
Well, actually, we're going to add that, a human life. But I can kill a dog, can I?
It says you shall not kill.
No, I'm not talking about the commandment yet. I'm talking about terminology. Because if
Yeah.
our terminology,
You can take the life out of anything that's living.
we won't understand the commandment. So killing, all killing means is the taking of a life.
Right.
All
Right.
right.
You shall not kill. Gotcha.
Don't repeat the commandment yet. We're not talking about the commandment. We're talking about the word kill. Okay.
You know, I don't. Okay. All right.
The word kill means to take a life. Period. All right.
And we kill always just to
Homicide.
eat.
The word homicide means for a human to take another human life.
Yes.
Okay? The word murder means for a human to deliberately and wrongfully take the life of another human being.
But is that
without justification?
Is murder how I want to say is it a political thing or is
Murder
it
is generally used, it's generally a legal term.
That's what I'm going to say. If that's a legal human term or is it a spiritual term? Like you were doing the other one. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, that's why I say in this section, it kind of interchanges murder with killing and all that kind of stuff. It's not real. I don't think it's real careful with its language. All right. But the whole point of the commandment is what kind of killing does the commandment forbid?
Okay. I understand what you're saying. I know I'm the only one talking here, and I know you're saying we're getting into terminology, but all I can see is that commandment. It says you, me, should not kill. And
okay. Well, that's what we're gonna.
And then we're putting all this other stuff in there.
Let me just put it together, okay? You're not letting me define the terms so that I can place the commandment in that context.
Okay, I'm gonna mute myself and not say one word until you finish.
Right. So we got those three terms, right? Killing, homicide, murder. So do not conflate them. Do not mix them up. They're not all the same thing. Killing is the taking of a life. Homicide is the human taking the life of another human. Okay? No intent, nothing. It's just anytime a human takes the life of another human, it's homicide. It has nothing to do whether it's right or wrong or justified or not justified. Okay? So when you're in a war and it's a just war and you kill somebody, it's still a homicide. Okay? It's not murder, but it's a homicide. Okay? Anytime a human takes another human's life, it's a homicide. When the state executes a prisoner and they have to put down the cause of death on his death certificate, what's the word they use? Homicide.
Homicide.
The execution of a human being is a homicide. It's not a murder. It's a homicide because one human being takes the life of another human being. Okay. A murder is going to be the wrongful and deliberate taking of another human life without justification. That's a murder. So when you murder someone, you have to have intent, You have to have the will. You have to, all of those kinds of things. Now, generally, murder is a legal term. So if you look in most states' laws, it will define for you what murder is. And then it'll even go further and say there's first degree murder, there's second degree murder, there's manslaughter, there's just unjustifiable homicide or something like that. All of these different other terms become legal terms so that when it happens, the law knows what to do with you. Okay. We're not going to necessarily get into all of that from a moral perspective, but we are going to kind of distinguish killing from homicide from murder. Okay. So, yes, you shall not kill. This is the commandment. So, who is you?
All of us.
Humankind.
So is God commanding the animals not to kill?
It's
No.
me.
No, it's a human being. Okay. Now, so you, a human being, shall not kill. Is it any killing? Should a human being not kill an animal?
Have to eat.
They had to for food.
We have to eat.
So we have to add that to the word kill. You human being shall not kill another human being.
Other human being.
Okay. So if you wanted to be technical, you shall not commit homicide.
Okay.
Okay. But the reason we don't say homicide is because of the legal terminology that is so we'll stick with kill. You shall not take the life of another human being. Okay. Let's just use that as the basis. Okay.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
far, so
okay.
good.
Mhm.
Now I highlighted in the first paragraph. What the church adds to that is innocent human being. You shall not take the life of an innocent human being. What do you think of that?
So this is a human being that has not committed an offense or sin or
Okay, well, the first thing we
defining
say
innocent.
it's limiting the human being, right? It's not you shall not take the life of any human being. You shall not take the life of an innocent human being. So we're going to have to explore what does innocent mean. And if the commandment only says you can't take the life of an innocent human being, then there must be some human beings whose life you can take. Right? Otherwise,
Even though that
you wouldn't have to modify human being.
Yeah, if you're trying to
right,
protect
because that looks like an extrapolation because the commandment itself at the beginning doesn't have all that. These are things we're adding to it.
So
Thank you, Gwen. Thank you, Gwen.
where does the church get off doing that?
Yeah, thank you, Gwen.
I'm sorry. Where does the church get off doing what, Father Rich?
Adding to the commandment, innocent human being.
Right. Because you protect, in some cases, you might have to protect the lives of other human beings.
Yeah, there's experience, right? And even in the Bible itself, even after God gives this commandment, there's certainly killing of other human beings, continues, and God doesn't indicate that it's sinful, what's going on. So, and then Jesus himself takes the commandment and expands on the commandment. Okay, so the idea that the church takes those 4 words, "You shall not kill," and puts it in the context of the experience of human life, which really is that's what the tradition of the church is, right? What the church has learned from the experience of living out life in relationship to God, the church takes its experience and it interprets the commandment in light of its experience.
Could it
And
be
that's
that the
what
church
makes
is trying to justify our participation in wars? And we think about, the wars during the Middle Ages and all of that. So those people, and also, what about the death penalty? Catholics are strongly against the death penalty.
Well,
but that's those people that have been convicted of something that receive a death penalty are not necessarily innocent. So they kind of contradict each other.
Just be careful. Probably most Catholics support the idea of the death penalty.
Well, I do.
So yeah, that's the only reason I want to highlight that is because it's all in here. So if you want to know more about the death penalty, it's all in this section. The death penalty, war, the just war theory, it's all in here. We don't have time to go over it. But the reason I highlighted innocent human being is that what's going to happen is you're going to spin off a whole morality based on who you can kill and who you can't kill.
So one thing that I'm coming away with as we've been doing this is it's really showing how we have these commandments and we have these words that were given to us in these instructions. But to keep it dynamic, we have this interpretation, this application of it to life as we're going through it. And it takes it, and that's why the Decalogue is not static. It is dynamic.
And that's why the Catechism of the Catholic Church is far longer than the Ten Commandments.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Because we take the Ten Commandments and then we live life and we interpret it based on our experience. And that's going on till this very day.
Yes.
Okay. And it's not that God hasn't revealed to us that thou shalt not kill. It's that we're still figuring out what God meant when he said, thou shalt not kill.
Well, Gwen.
Yes.
Reading the Monday Bible study and trying to get this across to the people who are new to the Bible study is going to be a challenge for you. Because, we're sitting here trying to decipher how to get all this out of you shall not kill. I'm only imagining what you want to have to go through with innocent human beings who don't understand how we go through this.
Well, Gwen's up for the task. Don't forget, Gwen's got a master's degree.
Yes, she does. But Father Rich,
and the master's told me I need to continue studying over and over and over again.
How about that?
There you go, Gwen.
But Father Rich, it's almost like you explained earlier, because I'm thinking God didn't tell us everything, but he gave us everything that we not need to know in the revelation of Christ. And who said it was dynamic? We will constantly be finding out more and more as we live life, because nothing is black and white. We have to kind of figure this out. God has given this to us, but we have to figure it out. Right. So that makes perfect sense, and things make more sense.
Right, and that's a great word, Gwen, dynamic, because that is really the purpose of the tradition of the church, to keep it alive.
Yeah.
It's not static and locked in. And, it's playing itself out politically when you have, people who are advocating that when you interpret the Constitution of the United States, you have to limit it to the words that it's using and what those words meant in 1787 when it was written. And for the most part, in the legal world, that has been rejected by most scholars, because the idea is the Constitution has to be a dynamic document in order for this country to continue to survive. And so we have to keep, trying to understand what they were getting at, but how that applies today. Because, 250 years later, it's a different world. And so we can't limit our government to what it was doing in 1787. That's, in my opinion, ridiculous. And if you believe that, you didn't read what the founders were trying to do. I mean, Thomas Jefferson's was so afraid of rule from the grave, which is the idea that you're locked into what the ancestors said, that he thought that every law should expire every 20 years and that the laws would have to be reenacted every 20 years to keep it dynamic, right? So that you wouldn't be locked in. Now, that proposal was not accepted, but it's clear that Thomas Jefferson thought that law had to be dynamic,
Right.
or else it wouldn't work.
Right.
And I'm confident that our founders knew they were writing a living document that would last for years. They didn't think it was only going to apply for their day. And that's exactly what the church's tradition is. The idea that God may have revealed stuff to us 2,000 years ago, but it's a living word that God gives us. And it's going to take us years to unpack what it is, what that word is, and what it means to us today. Doesn't matter what it meant to them 2,000 years ago. Otherwise, Gwen, if you did that, you go back to Sarah and Abraham and you start saying, well, I guess you can have multiple wives because Sarah and Abraham did. And Solomon, what did he have, 40 wives? Um, you know, but we don't do that because it's a dynamic, it grows in time. And we learn that whether it was right or wrong for Solomon to have 40 wives, that's irrelevant. What we've learned is this is what God calls us to today, as we understand it today. And we may understand it differently 50 years from now. But today, this is how we understand it. Otherwise, we will never grow. We'll be locked into the way the world was 2,000 years ago.
That's what I was getting at last week when I was talking about the Catechism and the Constitution, that it would have to be well, as you say now, dynamic document because times are different. People's understanding are different than it was back then. And so how I see that in the Constitution now is something's going to have to happen because when you have 9 justices, 5 of which are controlling history, really, because that's the absolute stop right there. You know what I mean? Once it gets there, this is how we interpret what the founding fathers, right? Sometimes they want to stick to it. Sometimes they want to expand it, but you can't appeal what their decision is. And I think we'll be in a lot of trouble if that thing isn't blown up.
Well, you have to be careful. Nothing's absolute. And the court itself, right, which we just saw, overrules itself. So it does change. We may not like what it did, but the very fact that it could overrule Roe versus Wade is evidence that the court itself is not static. Okay, we might not like it, but and that means their interpretation today in another 50 years can be overruled and redone. So it is a dynamic process. Yeah. They want to try to convince you that they're working on eternal principles, but they're really just exercising a different power. There are 3 forms of power in our government, right? There's legislative, executive, and judicial. And they all have power to some extent. And the history of our Constitution has been in a fight over whose power is going to rule at what time.
Yeah. I think I also have a problem with that. who do they answer to? You know, that lately they're just violating their own ethics rules, but nobody can enforce it, or nobody has enforced it till this date anyway. That, I think I have a problem. That may be different, but that's the
Yeah,
problem I have with that.
that can grow. I mean, and it does, and it changes based on experience. We haven't in the past had the kinds of questioning of what the justices are doing the way we do today. And so issues arise, and then we have to address them.
And
So
as we
the
kept
analogy is very much like what happens in the church. All right, we're just constantly confronting new situations that, you know, most of us here are over 50 years old, right?
no,
No,
of us.
No,
Everybody
When
saying no.
when
no.
you were, let's just say, when you were 20 years old, did it even occur to you that a man and a man could get married, or that a woman and a woman could get married?
No,
no.
it did
It,
not.
it
Nope.
wasn't even on your radar. And it wasn't like, I remember when I became pastor of Corpus Christi Church in 2000, so that's 24 years ago. And it, had a very significant gay and lesbian population. So I was learning how to do that ministry in a public context. And at some point, um, somebody talked about gay marriage. And honest to God, so I was 40 years old, and I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't know that anyone thought a man and a man could get married, or a woman could get married. It just wasn't even in my worldview.
Well, I think
Uh,
people's
and
world.
and look where we are, right?
Well,
So, Father Rich, in that regard, do you believe in a woman's right to have an abortion?
Once you
You don't have to answer that.
it is a political question. It's
Yeah.
not a moral question. The moral question is it morally acceptable for a woman to have an abortion?
Got it.
The answer is no.
And
Got
the answer is it depends. Okay?
it.
my answer is this.
Really?
It's not no or yes. It depends.
I thought it
Because
was no.
morality, if you're talking about sin, requires those three elements: an evil act with full consideration and full consent of the will. Okay, not all abortions occur with those three elements in place.
And the
Right.
question is
So
not.
you have to say intentional.
Wait a minute.
So,
Intentional.
Is not.
It's up to
Question.
individuals. And the individual has to make that decision.
Loretta, the question is not about abortion. It is about the right to have the choice. It's about freedom of choice. And
so
that is what the question is about.
Right, but that's not a moral
Well,
question.
Well,
no, I'm not saying that.
it can
Do
be.
this, so then we're gonna because we could be here all day, and I got another appointment.
okay. The only reason I asked that question because Roe versus Wade did come up, and it was that Supreme Court decision that ruled that the Constitution protects a woman's right to have an abortion. So I guess my bigger question was, do you believe in that decision, or are
Okay,
you for
well,
against?
you're again moving.
That's a whole
Once
different thing.
once you move into the realm of government and politics, the issues are different. And I think
Yes.
that has been the problem in our country and even in our church, is we fail to make the distinction between the morality of abortion and the legality of abortion. Okay? And once those two issues became conflated, so that the morality and the legality are discussed as though they were the same thing, we have lost control of the conversation. So the question, do I believe a woman has a right to an abortion? Do you mean a legal right or a
Well,
moral right?
Moral right.
Because if it's moral right in the Catholic teaching, all rights come with responsibility. Okay, so if I'm going to talk about the moral right, my moral right to do anything, I also have to talk of my moral responsibility with respect to that. That's not a political issue. Okay. Politics doesn't do that. Politics, a right is, can the government interfere with your ability to do something? Or do you have a right to prevent the government from acting upon you?
You're
That's
right.
a totally different question.
Do you have the right to allow the government to help you make your choices? Okay, let's pray.
When you put when you're talking about the right of the government, you're talking about a legal right.
Right.
Okay, and that's what we often are talking about when we're talking about abortion, but we conflate them, and so we mix it up. The idea to say, I think abortion is morally wrong, but I think that the government should not interfere with a woman's act of having an abortion. It is a concept that you can have, okay? But it raises questions when you say that. And some of them are moral questions, and some of them are legal questions. But they're not the same. And that's, we can't have that conversation anymore in this country. We have conflated, on the issue of abortion, we have conflated morality and legality, and we will not allow a conversation on one without the other. And that is a shame. And I think the church has paid a price for that, because the church got sucked right into that. And so now I can't teach the church's moral teaching on abortion without being accused of denying the legal elements. And they're two separate things.
I think that's why they do it deliberately, Father, to keep people confused, and just for what you just said, to make it harder for you to teach that which the church teaches.
But even the church got sucked into that.
Yes.
The church would not allow a distinction between the morality and the legality. Okay? It's the same thing with same-sex marriage. Okay, and that's what we were looking at today. There's the whole morality of what marriage is under God's view, but then there's the legality under the state's view. And what I would say as a lawyer in the United States is that our government has every right to define a relationship and give rights and privileges with respect to that relationship. Okay. It may not be what I consider marriage or a sacramental marriage, but if the government says in this country, if two people do this, they get certain rights and privileges because of it, that's what the government does. It does it all the time, right? I don't believe that it's a sacramental marriage, but it's a legal marriage.
It's a legal marriage.
And what we just read in there was actually the church's rejection that the government even has the ability to do that. Okay, that it would say the government has no ability to define a relationship as a marriage other than a relationship between a man and a woman, because that's God's law, and the government has no authority to buck God's law. And I just kind of think that's a little silly. The government does that all the time, and we live with it. So we think it's wrong not to worship God on Sunday, right? The government doesn't make us do that or not make us do that. We don't insist that our civil laws reflect everything we believe morally. You know, we say, well, that's not appropriate for the government to do, or this is appropriate. We do it all the time. Um, but but on these issues, the church really conflates those two things, and that's why it becomes so difficult, because it's saying that the government has no right to do X, Y, and Z. And that's because it's conflating morality with legality. So we'll end with that and say, what a day.